I would love to introduce you to my really good friend, BODIL, colleague. We've shared many journeys together, including our 3-year open dialogue education in London. The first one, those of you who heard Nick yesterday. So we're from 2015, which, wow, so a little while ago. And how many years is it since we met? 2005, 6, something like that. It's a long time. Yes. So, yes, so you used to work actually together in the same place, a halfway house, a halfway home. And now you are the head of the municipality and are doing
not quite.
Well, no, but okay, perhaps not the top, but you're high enough to be able to do some very interesting changes, including introducing the idea or ideas of open dialogue on a municipality level. And I think there's great. That's one of the things many people have asked about is. How can we introduce ideas of open dialogue into, a sort of a bigger area or even just introduce it. And I think the idea when people are sufficiently high up in the system that have the possibility to do so, that's very exciting. So I think what you do and have to offer is amazing, exciting. So yeah, looking forward to hearing what you want to share with us today. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored to be here and feel a bit humble about it as well. But, and being alongside the Tromsø medication-free ward, was also thinking, okay, we'll see. But people are still coming in, I can see. So welcome. My plan is to do a presentation for, I don't know how many minutes, maybe half an hour, and then we can have some kind of conversation from that. I'd like to hear your thoughts about it too, and what it makes you think about when you hear it. So I've prepared some stuff here. Oh yes, and please feel free to interrupt with questions or comments, or if something looks really wrong or goes too fast. I know I can at some point start blah, blah, speed talking, so please help me be understandable to you. But as Olga didn't say, but as is the truth, I'm head of adult social services in Lyngby-Taarbæk Municipality. She does make it sound like I'm the mayor or some kind of like very high up in the administration, which I'm not, but I am head of adult social services in our municipality. And Lyngby-Taarbæk Municipality is kind of like a relatively small municipality in just north of Copenhagen. We have 56,000 inhabitants. And a municipality in Denmark is kind of like responsible for everything from roads and local buses to schools and employment services and social services for elderly, disabled people and people with mental health problems. So really, the adult social services is kind of like a small corner of the whole organization. But we are working on that, trying to kind of like spread this out towards the whole of the welfare system in the municipality, and of course also crossing the sectors, because one thing that's not in the municipality is the hospital system, including the treatment psychiatry. So a lot of the mental health work is kind of like outside of our sector, but we do have social services for people with mental health problems and other challenges. Yes. So I'd like to start by showing, I know you can't really see this, but to show an overview of what oh, it's not changing. We didn't check this out, and I don't know how. I'm gonna try again. There it goes. An overview of the model that we're kind of like have co-created and I'm trying to kind of like work with in our organization. And I'm going to zoom in later on the different bits of it. So this just to kind of like get you like an idea of what I think is also something. I'm always thinking that we didn't actually invent anything very spectacular here, but we did in some ways do something different to at least what is done other places in Denmark, some other places in Denmark in the social sector that are trying to introduce inspiration from open dialogue, because open dialogue is kind of like the new black in Denmark. It's kind of a huge thing. Well, maybe not that huge, but it's kind of like modern, but it's also many times being introduced as something like an add-on. So you have dialogical networks meetings, you add that onto the service you have already, which is really good, but it's also where we have tried to kind of like do something else and try and kind of like work more with the whole system and the way we meet people, and of course introducing dialogical network meetings as part of that. So we're very inspired by the Western Lapland model and open dialogue, but have also tried to kind of like work from the context that we have and find ways of modeling that in a way that makes sense with the job we have to do and the way we work. Yes, and I'm going to start in a little bit different place actually, because also to perhaps understand the change, maybe I'm thinking you might need a bit of a context of what we're changing it from, because the thing that we're changing it from is in many ways also the conditions that are kind of like defining what's possible to do and the conditions of our way of kind of like working with this model and working in this system. So basically, probably like many other places, the Danish welfare system is under huge pressure. There's high and rising expenses of public welfare, and there's been kind of like years of trying to reduce costs. And in the social services, this has generated this idea that if we just define these quality standards, standards of care, but also quality standards defining how malfunctioning you have to be in order to access social services, then we can reduce costs. And this has been kind of like a model that's been worked with for many years in Denmark, and giving the social councillors this role of ticking, like defining whether or not you are allowed to have social services, and also defining the levels of support. And this, of course, means that they get kind of like a role as a doorkeeper, because you keep like making the threshold higher and higher to keep people out, and the role of the social councillors has been very much like keeping people out of the services. And of course, this is quite important for me. This is not about social workers not wanting to help or not wanting to listen or not wanting to let people in, but it's about a system that has given them the role and the job to keep people out, because we have to reduce costs. Another a bit of this model that's been kind of like rolling over the Danish welfare system is this market logic that the social councillors are kind of like buying the social help from someone else. So there's kind of this idea, this is very new public management, of course, this idea that the social councillor is ordering something from the social services. So this is orderer, the deliverer, and then the receiver, in kind of, and they have to be very split. So this is of course the problem is that this doesn't work, even in reducing costs, even if that was the idea. Maybe it does in the short term, but it doesn't on the long term. So it hasn't helped at all in the problem that was. And basically, what we're trying to do with this model of this new ways of working is kind of like reversing that idea completely and doing more or less the opposite. And trying to invest in helping people like straight away when they need help, instead of like keeping them out. So I'm going to zoom into the different steps of this model, because first of all, of course, we've been really working hard on trying to create this open door instead of the closed door on the highest threshold. And we've actually also decided to work on not just having not making one new extra door, but rather to work with the ways, because we have realized that people do tend to find us through different doors, and we have different ways of getting in. But so rather than making a new door and telling people, oh, you can't go here, you have to go to that door, then we've kind of like worked with this idea that we need the door to be open wherever people go to meet us, and we need to meet them in the same way. So we have already had this acute crisis service. This is not new. It's open 24/7 for people who have acute crisis and need help for that. This is a unit that kind of like used to understand themselves as something outside of the system, even if it was part of the municipality all along. They tended to become kind of like this organization that was kind of helping the people who were asking for help. They were being very helpful, but they also seemed to see themselves as someone struggling against the system, which is perhaps not so strange, because the system seemed to have the closed door. Now they are kind of a part of the open door, part of the way into the system if people need help. But also we have another main entrance to our services is through these adult counselors, the social counselors at the administrations. And the idea here is, because they were the people who used to be closing the doors, and now of course we're working with their role, like changing it to being the ones opening the doors. And the idea is, of course, that no matter where you meet our services, you're met in the same way, by being welcoming, opening the doors, and kind of like ensuring people that they've come to the right place, and of course being curious about how do you understand your problems, what's the problem as you see it. But also from this very first contact, when people ask for help, to have this relational and network perspective, and being curious about, so who else knows about this, and of course who could also be helpful. So from the very first contact, no matter where you enter, we ask these questions, and we have to focus on the network. So from this first meeting or first conversation on the telephone, what's being done is, out from these questions, we invite a network meeting with, of course, the people that the person has pointed to as being the relevant people to invite. Also being able to invite different professionals if that's relevant. And a very central idea of this is that this meeting, just like in Lapland, is always led by two professionals. But in our system, we have decided that it's kind of like always led by one person from one social counselor, so one of those who has received the first call, and then also one person from our home support team, the ones that offer individual and group support for people with problems. So we kind of like, and these are, again, this is the buyer and the seller that used to be in the system, very split, because they had to kind of like be different. That was the idea of the old model, and now we meet together from the very first meeting and meet the families together. These have all been. Our staff have been trained together or introduced together by Olga and myself. So been introduced to dialogical practices and these ideas of working. And even if we do have also some staff in our organization that have longer trainings in dialogical practices, but we've decided to invite them to the very introductory level as well, because the idea has been all along to not only learn it, but also to co-create it, to also have this introduction as a way of talking about our practice together and developing our practice together. And this, of course, also means that these different professionals now hold the responsibility together. They hear the stories together instead of this split situation, and they're kind of forced to be in the process together also when things can be really difficult. So they don't get this tension about making stories about each other that I'm afraid I have to say was the situation before. Not always, but sometimes. And this is, of course, it requires investment, because and in the beginning there was a lot of questions about how can we be like two professionals at the meetings? Is that too much time to spend and have all these meetings? Is it even necessary? Could we solve these things with different ways? But I'm experiencing that the more we have them, the more people, the staff also have this experience that it's actually, we get somewhere else by doing this, and it's worthwhile the investment because we actually have this process together. The way these meetings are held is very inspired, of course, by Open Dialogue in Western Lapland. So there's no agenda to the meeting. People are asked, what's the story behind the meeting? How would you like to use this meeting? And the facilitators are making sure that every voice is heard and noticing and responding everything that's said. This has been something that's been a bit challenging to our social councillors who are used to like knowing that, or have also a feeling that they have an agenda, because they are in many ways also representatives of the knowledge of the social legislation, what's possible, what do they need to have answers to. And we've, in a way, you could say that's the old role. We just want to change that, but I think that's too simple to put it that way, because of course they have to be aware. That's also their job, to be aware of what are the laws, what are the rules around this. So instead of kind of like saying that can't be introduced, and to say, but this is your agenda. Like the family members, each family member may have an agenda. They probably have an agenda they bring into the meeting. So we have to make space for the social councillors' agenda as well, but as an agenda that stands alongside the private networks meeting, the private networks agendas. And of course, it's always a balance. This then making sure or making this room where the social councillor doesn't get to kind of like dominate the meeting or rush to a conclusion, because they kind of like, they're used to like going for quick solutions because they want to find solutions for the problems. But I think we have good processes and dialogues around that. Another core thing is, of course, is adapting to the network language. And this is, of course, about, as an Open Dialogue, about staying present, responding to people in ways that hopefully make them feel heard. But it's, of course, also about recognizing that words have power. So as much as they can be helpful and be ways of like finding new words and new meanings, they can also be extremely powerful and restraining and oppressing sometimes. Like using diagnostic language can be that, but also being aware that we're also as a social service in a situation where the things that are talked about in these meetings can have severe consequences for the clients or for the people who are asking help. They can lose their unemployment benefits if they don't oblige to certain rules. They can lose their housing, their right to see their children. So there are kind of many difficult areas and topics where we have to be aware about how we use the language, and how we are aware of the role and the power that we represent as a social service representatives in the meeting. And of course, we can't making these challenges go away by listening or by having dialogues, but sometimes listening really carefully and using the words of the network rather than our power language can perhaps make a bit more of the connections possible and make dialogue possible, and then maybe we have ways of finding good ways forward instead of getting stuck. Another focus, obviously, in the network meetings is unfolding this polyphony. So not only hearing everyone's voices, but also allowing and encouraging that differences of opinions can be spoken up, and all the time opening up rather than shutting down. And of course, we use reflections in the meetings, again, using the same words carefully, without judging and analyzing, and making sure every voice is also being responded to in this way. And again, like in as I understand it in Western Lapland, we're also trying not only to introduce reflections, but also to suggest that, or make room for the professionals also to have discussions about how they see what the ways forwards, and that there can be different ways forward. I think this is one of the most challenging things in our system, that to actually voice these differences of opinions in the meetings. I think that the conflicts that I've been called to kind of like help with between staff have been mainly about why didn't you say this at the meeting, or why did you suggest that, and now you gave me more work. And this and helping people to voice this in the meetings is really something that I experience as really challenging. But I think again we have good dialogues around it, but it's I don't know, there's something about this very strong idea that as professionals we have to agree that is really being challenged by this view, but we're working on it. So back to the overview. This is only the first network meeting, the first black box in here we've moved to. And of course, the outcome of these meetings are open. It's obvious that no one knows where we go from that. Sometimes where we go is have another meeting in maybe not next day is possible in our organization, but in the next week or whenever it's possible. But it is also possible at the very first network meeting to if it makes sense, if it's needed or helpful for people to decide at the meeting that we can offer further support. This is something that's also new in our system. Usually you would have to go through an assessment and all this ticking boxes in order to be let into the system. But now we can already at this first network meeting decide if it's needed and helpful to continue. And then if it is, for the people who see that a meaning in that, they're invited to a welcome meeting at our home support team, where the different options that they have are presented alongside an introduction to a recovery-oriented and trauma-informed and relational mindset. And introducing like this, the idea that it's even possible to recover from mental health problems, which is unfortunately still not something that is that everyone have heard when they have met the mental health system in Denmark. So this team offers both individual and group support, and groups can be around, well, whatever is needed, obviously, but it could be around hearing voices, life history, coping strategies, but it can also be around practical stuff, everyday life, personal economy, relationships and network, building that and working with the local community. And all of this is not new either. We've had these groups and individual support in our system for many years, but as I said before, it was kind of like it was what was behind the high threshold, and now we've taken away that threshold so that you can access these immediately if it's helpful. And another thing that's changed is actually, as we've done these trainings and different ways of working, our staff have started to do these groups in different ways. They've introduced dialogical practices into the ways they work with the groups as well, like facilitating reflections between the people who use the groups and stuff, and inviting the network to the groups as well. This is a new thing. We weren't allowed to do that before. But parallel to this individual group support, if that's said, we keep having the network meetings and meeting there and talking about how it goes and what makes sense and where to go next, or whatever else is important to talk about, of course. And we have in the model these continuing doors that it kind of like indicating that this is not a system that you have to stay in. We of course, whenever the person or the network or both are ready to move on, there are ways out of the system all the time, and knowing that it's always easy to re-enter, so which hopefully also makes it easier to go out the door and feel strong enough to do that. But of course, for some people, more help is also needed. In the Danish legislation, it's individual support in this setting is only allowed to give without assessment and visitation for half a year at the maximum. So at least after half a year, we have to decide, or in a network meeting, but to have the conversation about, do we need more support or longer term or more intense support, and then the assessment is needed. But the idea of this model is that rather than starting all over and doing this assessment at this point, then because the social counselor is part of all the network meetings along the way, then the social counselor can hopefully do the assessment with the information they've had together with the client, and then decide quite quickly so that the support can continue. And it's also possible to continue the support really, but now in a different category. So I think this is, for me at least, an example of trying to, okay, we have the legislation in Denmark that we have, and we have the boxes and the stuff and the rules, but we can try and adapt this and find our way of meeting people's needs within these regulations and stuff, and trying to then help people make the journey meaningful. I'm just thinking about time here. And of course, yeah, another important point is that if it's evident from the very first contact that more support is needed than this system can, then if it's obvious, for instance, people need a residential facility from the very first support, then of course we start that. But we can also, and you need an assessment for that, so that process starts right away if that's necessary. But we can still start the help from the first day while the process of the assessment and visitation is going on. I have a final slide because this is important for me. I think about this network-based approach that I want to say a few words about, because I think, I don't know, maybe because the network-based approach and the dialogical approach in a way is so concrete, it's about inviting the network. But of course, there are many situations where there isn't, at least in Denmark, there isn't any network, or the person doesn't want their network involved. So sometimes I meet this idea that, well, then we can't have a network-based approach, or then we can't have a dialogical meeting. But I think there's so much more to this understanding, and this drawing is inspired by Jaakko Saikola's presentation of the vertical and the horizontal voices that are presented in a network meeting, like this idea that people are relational beings in their situation and context, but also in their life history, and carrying the voices of whoever they met in their lives, that be loving and caring voices, but also, of course, difficult and traumatic voices from experiences that they have had with them. And I think for me, this way of understanding people and understanding suffering and understanding joy, for that matter, is so important that this is really what the whole thing is about. It's not only about because of course inviting the network into a meeting is one way of working with this, but there are so many other ways of working with it, just by looking at people and being, because this idea means that obviously you have to be curious about what has happened in people's lives, what relationships have been important in people's lives, what are they carrying with them, even if they don't carry the network with them because they don't want to, or they have lost contact. So but the network is still with them, or the relationships they've had, and all the structural inequalities and power issues that they have experienced through their lives is with them as well. So this is also something that's really important for me, that we also bring into our way of meeting people, this notion that whatever people have met has also become part of their response to the world, or they're embodied in their situation, and we have to be so aware of this, also the power aspects. I could talk for a long time about that, but I'm not going to. So I think this is the words for now. And stop sharing. I have to find the right button.